Hey everyone, I hope that you're all doing well and staying safe and warm this snow day. What would normally be a snow day if we were in an in person class. Um, I hope that you have the ability to stay inside and stay safe today. Um, in terms of where we're headed this week, I wanted to post a video just to kind of wrap up what we were doing with Unit 3 and talk about moving on to Unit 4. I will be providing feedback on the timeline and journals over the next couple of days. Just the way things kind of worked out this week, I got a little behind the kind of schedule I usually like to keep with that. So you should be seeing feedback on those soon. Um, I'd enjoyed our conversations that we had on Twitter about caudillos and nation building. That's what we were talking about in Unit 3. We kind of ended up with that issue of scientific racism and trying to figure out why Latin American elites would adopt, what were racist ideas about their own nations, the people that lived in their own nations, in an effort to get capital, to get investment from the United States, from Europe, to build infrastructure, to build economies. Um, why did those two things sort of coincide during that period of neo-colonialism, as we called it? So it wasn't that the United States or European nations colonized Latin America again, but instead they used economic investment and outside capital, sometimes in the form of loans, sometimes through multinational corporations, or what we would call today multinationals. Um, those were the ways that Europe, particularly Britain, and the United States in the late 19th century gained power in Latin American nations. Um, so that's where we ended up Unit 3. Unit 4, we're going to move on to see how and why different Latin American leaders ended up pushing back against those ideas. And a couple of things that they used to do that were the concept of nationalism. So, really focusing on their individual nations, what they see make them great. So, in Mexico, we're going to see the Mexican Revolution, 1910 to 1920, a violent upheaval that results in very different ways of thinking about um, and very different ways of thinking about things like mestizaje, mixed race populations. A man named Jose Vasconcelos comes up with this concept called La Raza Cósmica, or the cosmic race, in which he makes an argument that pushes back hard against scientific racist ideas. Um, and when we say scientific, of course, it's pseudoscientific. Today, the ideas that were being put forth at the turn of the 20th century would not be seen as scientific, but they were then. So just wanted to make that caveat since I've been saying that word, that term. Um, but we're going to see how ideas like La Raza Cósmica emphasized the strength of mixed race populations and the added cultural value that they brought um, to the world at large. And so that's one aspect of what we're doing. We're also going to look at the Depression era, the World War II era, and think about how populist leaders like Lázaro Cárdenas in Mexico, like Gaitán, like Juan Perón and Getulio Vargas in Brazil, how they were able to gain influence and power in their nations, and what the kind of balance sheet was in terms of the their kind of trend toward almost authoritarianism in a lot of cases versus the kinds of things that they were doing to benefit their people. Um, and so that was part of the balance there in the early to mid 20th century, and how those leaders were able to push back on the international stage and try to um, create um, benefits for their own people rather than having the benefits of economic development go out of the country to the United States or to Great Britain. So one of the key things then with the units guiding question as we read and we post to Twitter this week is to think about the idea of self-determination. And that's underlying many of the things that I was just talking about. These various nations, through their sometimes populist leaders, wanted to figure out how they could determine their own path forward, keep wealth in their countries for their people, or at least for the elites in their countries, rather than benefiting the major kind of global powers at the time. So how did things like nationalism and populism contribute to self-determination in this context? Um, that's the question to keep in mind as we work through this week's readings and such. So as always, please let me know if you have any questions, if there's anything I can help with. I hope that your week is off to a great start, and I'll talk to you soon.